Like magic, I appear here before you, and I want to talk to you about number 22 reason to love Riversong guitars, and that's machine heads, and in particular the machine heads that we use and why we chose those ones. So let's go through machine heads in general, and so we're all on the same page, and then we can talk about the ones that we use on all of our Canadian-made guitars. So machine heads in general, I think you can take down to 3 different types. You can take open gear, closed, and classical. Each one of them has benefits and reasons why they exist. Open gear is basically some of the very first ones that ever came up, and it simply is your peg with a hole in it, a gear on the back with a tuning key attached to it, and this is a worm gear. So how's that, Bonnie? Does that look okay?
Great.
Yeah. So you can see the gear on the back, and they're okay. When I first started working in the music industry, my first job was taking apart old guitars for these little gears, and these little gears were all different. Man, my drawing sometimes leaves a little bit to be desired, but every gear was a different size and a different type. You know, some of them would have lots of points to them. Some would be more rounded. Mm-hmm. Bonnie's a graphics artist, and she's going, "What are you doing?" But each one, depending on the brand and who was making them, they were all different. There was no standard. I used to take these apart. So when you'd come in with a broken key or the button was broken on them, because I used to use plastic on the buttons, we used to just replace those and have all those parts. In fact, I have many of those parts still. And to me, a tuning machine head is very similar amongst all of them. The closed tuning machine head has 2 differences between the open and the closed. It still has that gear. I'm going to try to draw this the same way. It has the worm gear, and it has the button on it, and the shaft with the hole on it for the strings to go through it. But what else it has is a housing, and that housing comes out like this. It seals this whole part so that it's free of getting dirt, because a lot of times dirt and crud get into that and then make it worn and create problems. It seals it all in there like that. But more importantly, because of this housing, there's another part that goes over top where the headstock goes through like this. There's another part that comes on, and it is threaded and has its nut on it, and that just comes over top and literally locks this puppy in place so that it's not capable of moving back and forth. Whereas with this, when it goes through a headstock design, there's your hole, they put in just a simple bushing. Does this make sense, Bonnie? Mm-hmm. Yeah, simple bushing like that to stop it from moving around. So this is much better in terms of this piece doesn't move around. It's much better for longevity, because as this bushing wears out, this twists, and then it also wears out that gear as well. It's stronger. They usually have little pins in here, or a tab with a screw that goes into it. These ones are usually done on a strip. And I've got some actual examples of these. But before I do that, I should tell you about the classical. And then the other difference is a classical tuning machine head is a slotted headstock design. There's your nut. And the classical tuning machine heads have the gears on the side like this. They go through, not to scale, and the strings come across the nut attached to this. But the difference is that this barrel, instead of being just a small piece of metal, is actually a much larger barrel, and it's usually got a nylon sleeve or a plastic sleeve over top of it, because the nylon strings, they stretch a lot more, they take a lot more to wind up, so you have to have a bigger barrel size so that you're okay with that. Otherwise, if you use just the standard steel, you'd have so many wraps, and then you'd lose a lot of your tuning stability. So these are basically the essential 3 differences between the tuning machine heads. Another kind of thing that's really interesting with tuning machine heads is if you're looking at the actual design of them, you'll notice that it's got a piece like this I think that might be one of my best drawings of that ever. And then there is a hole like this. So what happens is your string goes through it, and depending on how you wrap that string, come up back around, or whether you put a wrap on the top, those wraps, as you're wrapping it, keep going up on here like this and push that string against the top of that shaft and thereby locking it in place. So this taper area is really important to having good tuning stability. Pretty much all modern day tuners have this. It's kind of cool. There's some manufacturers that do something that's really cool. Let me just throw this where they put a screw in the top. So they screw that down and it pinches that wire in place. So that's like a locking tuning machine head. I don't feel you need that. If you put on your strings properly, they lock on place really, really well. So this is basically common knowledge of tuning machine heads. So let's actually look at what they look like. So this guy right here, this is an open gear tuning machine head, and you can see when I'm turning at worm gear, it's moving that back and forth. This is on a slotted headstock, which is kind of like a classical guitar, but if you notice, we use steel strings on this guy, and because of that, it's got the smaller barrel size. But if this was a classical guitar, we'd have much bigger barrels on that as well. And you can see that, remember I was saying that it was on one piece here. So that's all on one piece, one plate. If we look over on, this guitar, let me get you all confused. Other guitar, you got this one that I'm pointing at? Yeah, that's right. Bonnie, we're doing good. You know, Bonnie, it's been a lot of videos we made here. This is your typical style tuning machine head. And it's sealed, so the gear's inside of there. There's a worm gear. You can actually tighten it by adjusting this piece to put more tension on it. That piece that I was telling you about that helps lock it in place is this bolt here, bolts in from that side. And actually, if we look at the side profile of this, you can even see what I just drew on the wall there. So it helps lock those strings in. That is a sealed tuning machine head. Now, what do we use on our Riversong guitars? Well, we use a special designed tuning machine head, and I'm really proud of these. These guys, am I okay over here, Bonnie? But you're going to become part of the videos whether you like it or not. We use a thing called ratio tuners. Now, let's just talk about the functionality of a guitar tuner. So when we're tuning, and we want to go from E to D, for example. Check this out. I'm going to turn it. That might be a quarter of a turn, okay? Now let's go E to D on the treble string. So there's our D. There's one full turn, okay? They're not the same adjusting range, and every string is different because there's different core tensions, there's different core diameters of the string, so every string feels different when you're tuning it. Now, that's okay if you're pro and you're used to this. This is all great. But if you're just starting out or trying to figure it all out and change tunings quickly, there's got to be a better way. So there is a better way. And this pretty smart guy, I'm not going to give him too many shout outs because I've already talked to him about the pins and stuff. But this company called Graphtech, and Dave Dunwoody said something really cool. He said that your E string, big thick E string, should have lots of teeth around it on that little gear. It got really bad there for a second. It's lots of teeth versus your treble E string should have less teeth. Now, if you go to their website, they've got much more elegant drawings and stuff, and maybe Bonnie will throw one up here while we're talking. So that when you do a full turn on either one of these, it should drop down to D. Whether it's a treble string or the bass string. And he's done that for each string. And what ends up happening is you end up with a guitar that is super consistent. So if I want to go down to D, there's my full turn there. If I want my E string to go down to D, there we go. Just in seconds like that, you can go through and adjust the tuning of your guitar. It feels better. Once you get used to this and you go back to the old style, you're like, ugh, what's going on here? So that's one of the things that we really like about our tuners. The buttons are a little bit bigger. You can see these little dots on them. That represents that they're Graphtec tuners. And each one is a different gear ratio, and they're numbered for each string. So I really like that. The last thing I want to talk to you about is how does a tuner affect the sound? Because there's a couple different things. When the string's pulling on these shafts, on this style of tuner, it's pushing up against a plastic, usually plastic bushing. It might be plated chrome or however they do that chrome plastic stuff. But essentially that string's pulling on it and it's making a contact point here and across the back here. When we look at a sealed tuning machine head, it's making full contact all along with steel, right on it, nickel, steel, whatever the material is. It's a much harder material, and that string is pulling. Okay. Regardless of whether we're using a standard tuning machine head or the ratios tuning machine heads, they are all attached using the same material, which is a steel shaft. So I've been a little bit against putting really expensive tuners on our guitars just for the sake of the brand name. I want to put on nice tuners that have actually a function. And as far as I can tell, and I've thought about it lots, it doesn't make any difference once you're tuned in place which steel shaft you're using, because they're all the same steel shafts. So for me, the functionality of being able to adjust the strings and having a smoother, more accurate response with the strings and the tuners is why we chose ratio tuners. Plus, they're made and they're designed in British Columbia here. So it's a BC company, and that's one of our things around our backyard. Anyways, that's what we do. We make these Riversong guitars with our patented necknology for adjusting the neck angle in seconds. Beautiful things like the ratio tuners. And that's number 22, why our guitars should be loved.